Before we dip into your podcast, we just want to get a little background on you and your family roots in Lindenhurst, because that's what we're about. So obviously you did not grow up in Lindenhurst, but your mother did, correct?
Yeah, she did. I know when you guys contacted me, I was like, this is a little awkward. I'm not from Lindenhurst. Yeah, but my grandparents were originally from like West Babylon area, and very classic 1950s high school sweethearts. And
Yeah.
I think they were tired of Babylon. They'd been there their whole lives, and so they decided to go to Lindenhurst after my grandfather got back home from fighting in Vietnam. And that's where my mom was born, my uncle, and she grew up there. They were in South 14th Street.
Okay.
That's the house that they were at. Like, I don't know, that part of Lindenhurst. Lindenhurst is a lot bigger than I thought
Yeah.
originally.
Not far from
Um,
where I grew up.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 10 or so blocks away. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool. We went to, I've been to Lindenhurst a few times, even though we don't really have any family there anymore. Most of our family's in like West Babylon area.
Okay.
But
But
seeing
you did grow up coming here and visiting?
Oh my gosh, yes, all the time. My grandmother was still living in the area. I have like aunts and uncles, like a ton of people that still live in Babylon and then further out east. So Long Island kind of feels like a second home. I think my mom came to New Jersey for college, but now that she's getting older, she's like, I just want to go back to Long Island. Like
Oh,
she's
really?
itching to go back. Yeah. So we go there every time, like any chance we get, really.
Got you. So what are some of your first memories of coming here and visiting?
Oh gosh. Hmm. Let me think about that. That's a good question. Well, we would go by the water a lot, like in Lindenhurst. We'd go by the water and just kind of chill. I just love like the salt in the air. You kind of smell that. So I mostly remember that, but mostly spending time with my grandmother. Like we would read
Mm,
books and hang out in her apartment. We didn't get to see her all that much. And she passed away in 2012. So whenever we go onto the island now, it just feels like so like nostalgic. Like we really reminisce about like my grandmother and my mom's life. Because it wasn't always like very easy for them. Like my grandfather passed away when my mom was like 12.
okay.
So a lot of love for my grandmother. She was really like the matriarch, single mom who
Right.
worked hard to raise my mom and my uncle. So when she passed away, it was really hard on everybody. So
Yeah.
I just think of my grandmother most of the time when we're out there.
And so South 14th Street. So your mother, just knowing what I know about the case that we're going to get into, your mother was born around 1969, 1970.
Yeah, 1969. That's
Okay.
right.
So that would have made her a class of 87.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, and they stayed in Lindenhurst until 1987, and then my grandmother packed everything up and they went out to Coram, and then that was the last time they lived in Lindenhurst. So it's been a while since anyone in my family has been there.
And you said your mother went to college in Jersey and stayed there.
Yeah, yeah. My dad, Fairleigh Dickinson University in Teaneck. It's like a small college,
Yeah.
and yeah, never left. Had
And
me and
your parents met there.
Yeah, they did. My dad's originally from Colombia, so that's people see my last name and they don't know if it's like Greek or something, but it's not. My dad's from Colombia, and yeah, they met in college, and yeah, she never left.
Then obviously you came along eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
Any siblings?
Yeah, I have a younger sister. She's 4 years younger than me, and she's actually going to Penn State right now, which is where I graduated.
Okay. And so just a little bit about you growing up. We won't get too deep into that, but were you always into writing?
Yeah, my parents would tell you like I was always kind of in my own little worlds, like coming up with stories and characters in my head and just loving to like play pretend and all that sort of thing. So I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I just never knew necessarily what that would look like if that would be like writing for movies or maybe writing books or something like that. I really didn't know until I got to high school. I took a journalism class and really fell in love with it. And that was also around the time of the 2016 presidential election. So there was like
Mm,
a lot of, that was really an
a lot of material there.
it was really intense watching the news at that time for everybody, not just me, everybody, no matter what side the aisle you're on. It was a really intense moment in our history.
Yeah.
So that really put some fire in my belly, thinking to myself, I want to be a part of this. I want to be one of like the good guys, I guess, like one of the good journalists, because there was also like that was the beginning of fake news and like,
Yeah.
almost like a war on journalism. So that really inspired me. Like I want to do this, but I want to do it the right way and almost like redeem the reputation of like journalists, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Especially, at that time, I mean, Trump was shitting all over journalists.
yeah. And the job of journalists, and I think some people forget this, it's really to uh, give voice to the voiceless and like almost be a check on those in power and in the government. And that doesn't matter. It's not supposed to matter necessarily politically if it's right or left, but
It's just supposed
it's
to
very
be, yeah.
it's supposed to be unbiased. But it's just very politically polarizing, and it has been since 2016, which is exhausting and it's hard to watch, but that really made me inspired. Like, I want to be one of the good ones. I want to fix this. I want to be that unbiased character that is just saying it how it is and setting the facts right, setting the record straight,
Yeah.
on
And coincidentally, on a side note, that's how John and I met. We were in a
Right.
journalism class
In
together.
a high school journalism class.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Did you guys like it?
Loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Charles Street Times. That was our paper.
I've heard of that paper because they did do a story on the Laura Parker case at one point. I don't remember when.
And I do vaguely remember back in high school, like at one point, Lindenhurst High School did have an open campus where you could leave for lunch. I don't know where you would go besides the Lindy Deli. There was nothing else around there.
It's in the middle of a residential area, so it's not really, prone to going to places. You can't really just hop right to a place and come back like you can some other high schools on Long Island.
Right. But there were like rumblings of like, oh yeah, somebody was killed a long time ago, and then they put the kibosh on that. So I'm assuming this is what they were talking about.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people and like who graduated after 1987, like maybe people who graduated in the 90s, like I'm assuming you guys did. I've had a lot of people reach out to me on social media being like, I thought this was just like an urban legend to scare kids from not skipping class. Like no one thought that this was real.
Right. Yeah.
It's true. It happened.
Oh, it looks like John froze up. Sorry.
Okay. Zoom.
Gotta love it, right?
I wonder if you can see it.
Yeah, I don't know. If he's not on in a few seconds, I'll continue. Geez. So we'll just continue a little bit while John gets his bearings again here. Problem. So we'll keep with your background story just a little bit. So in high school, were you writing for your school paper?
Yeah, I was the editor-in-chief of my school paper. I did that, and then I was a field hockey player. So that was my whole thing. Field hockey and newspaper. What else did I do in high school? It feels like forever ago, but it really wasn't. And then I did stuff for like my video production department, like TV production. And that's when I really figured out like, okay, like I want to be a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer. Like it's going to be something in communications. It's going to be something with journalism, something that feels like important and like meaningful and not just like silly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, not just a job for the sake of a job.
Yeah, totally. Like a real like passion.
What did your folks do for a living?
My mom's a teacher. She teaches second grade, and my dad is a real estate agent. But he's a man of many talents. Like he's like an amateur artist. He does on the side like paints, and then he's worked for Japanese tech companies, and now he's a real estate agent. He's like constantly doing new jobs and things like that.
Renaissance man.
Yeah, totally. That's him.
Very cool. Okay, so going off to college, you went to Penn State.
Yeah.
Majored in journalism, I presume.
Yeah, I majored in I double majored in broadcast journalism and political science because I thought I was going to be this investigative reporter on Capitol Hill, investigating politicians and trying to get to the truth of things going on Capitol Hill. But then when I got there, I kind of I realized I wanted to be more creative than just going into politics, like really doing something different. So I expanded my horizons to doing things like video marketing and television production, like getting behind the camera, being the person with the headphones and the clipboard behind the scenes, telling everyone what to do. Like that's really what I ended up loving. I thought that was what I was going to do. Like once I graduated college, I thought I was going to go into, video marketing or something like that. But then my last semester of college, I got into podcast production, and I was like, wait, I actually like this too. So maybe I am a bit like my dad, like a Renaissance man kind of thing. Like I really dipped my toes into a lot of different things. And that's when this whole thing started, was my last semester of college.
And so I would assume growing up, your mother did tell you about the Laura Parker thing, and or was that something that came later on that you learned about?
It was definitely later on.
Okay.
It was during college. I don't remember how old I was. I had to have been like I was probably like 20 when she told me. We both enjoy true crime, and a lot of people do. I think we just all have like this innate human nature to want to solve a mystery and like
Sure,
find
yeah.
the answers to the unknown. Like it's a huge thing all over the place. But me and my mom, like, if we'll go on road trips, we'll listen to true crime podcasts together. If a new documentary will come out, it's always me and her on the couch watching it.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't remember what documentary it was, but we were watching a documentary about a girl who had gone missing. And I guess in her mind that had sparked Laura, because she had never told me this before. Out of all the documentaries and all the things that we had listened to in true crime, she had never brought it up until this point. She didn't remember much, other than the fact that she had gone to middle school and high school with a girl who had gone missing and had been found murdered very close to her high school. And she had a memory of her. Oh my gosh, he's back. He had a memory of her. Hi.
Sorry about that. It wouldn't be a podcast without some sort of technical issue on our end.
That's it.
It's okay. I'm glad you're back.
So yeah, so and around age 20 is when you learned about the Laura Parker case. For your mother, who grew up, was the same age as Laura Parker, went to school with her, wasn't close with her, but obviously knew about what happened. And
Yeah. I mean, you grow up with kids, and you know of kids, but you weren't necessarily friends with them. It was kind
sure.
of like that. She remembered very specifically being in an art class with her, I think, freshman year, and then her just being gone, and no one really seemed to care about it at all, and no one really seemed to talk about it. So immediately, of course, my brain is like, the wheels are turning, and I'm thinking, hey, what's going on? What happened? Like, what do you mean?
And still unsolved to this day.
Still unsolved. And I did what any other person would do, which is just go to Google and look it up. And there really wasn't much. Like, I mean, this was like probably 2 or 3 years ago. There really wasn't much. There's been a lot more now, I think, because of many people trying to like reignite the conversation about Laura, but there really wasn't much other than a Reddit page, which kind of served as the treasure map for the future of the whole thing, of the whole podcast.
Yeah. And obviously like a different environment socially back then. From the little bit I know about the case, it was said that, oh, she smoked, so that automatically made her a bad kid. Right. And like, it was her choice to run away, and, to hell with it. But like, that was the attitude, and which, to think about now, it's crazy, but that's what people said back in the 80s.
Totally. Nothing like that, I don't think, would happen now.
No.
Just with social media, Amber Alerts, like a child goes missing, it's like it's something like the first, I think, 17 hours. I don't know, maybe that's wrong, but it's like definitely the first 24 hours are the most important.
Sure.
Child goes missing, and it's like they really didn't have any procedure for that. And in the 80s, a ton of kids were running away. It was like a huge epidemic across the nation.
There was also this whole satanic panic thing where like parents thought their kids were going to be murderers for listening to heavy metal records. And, it was just it was kind of the dark ages in a way, like before the internet.
The 80s were a hotbed for that kind of stuff too. Cause you also had like, what's his name? The America's Most Wanted guy, Adam Walsh, his son was abducted and kidnapped. So if you were like around our age, your parents were scared shitless of losing you in a department store, or, you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Right. Totally. Like a milk carton, kids, and all that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, okay. So now you're taking an interest in podcasts and true crime. And as you said, it's a pretty popular genre now. So what better time to reignite the conversation and have a podcast about it. So tell us a little bit about how you gathered people to interview and what your experience was like, with these people, and what more you gathered about the story from them.
Oh my gosh. It was, at some points, it felt impossible. It was mostly through social media, and that's like the beauty of social media is like everyone's essentially on there. A lot of it was Facebook. A lot of it was using my mother's yearbook from Lindenhurst. And like, it was like flipping through the pages of like, okay, let's see like what names pop up that people have messaged me, because people knew I was investigating it months ago over the summer, because I had put a post up in one of the Lindenhurst neighborhood groups. And that's when people really started reaching out to me with different theories, different names of people who were potentially involved or people that were friends with her. But the strangest thing was people who in the past had said they were friends with Laura weren't open to talking to me and weren't open to helping me and weren't cooperative. And a lot of that uncooperativeness that happened in the 80s continues to this day. And that's something I still can't wrap my head around. I mean, I understand if maybe you don't necessarily want to be on a podcast or you don't want your name out there,
Sure.
like that's fully understandable. But people,
But yeah, you could work with a certain degree of anonymity if they wanted to.
oh,
You know?
absolutely, because that's totally understandable. You don't. Some people don't want to be associated with it, I think, is the problem. So a lot of it was just trying to find people on social media who I had heard of or had been mentioned in the Reddit page, which was really the map. And then also just names that popped up in newspaper articles from back in the 1980s who were quoted and were experts in the case back then, who are still around today. Those people who were experts were way more interested in helping me and really putting the pieces together. Like they were my anchors through all of this, because you never know who you can trust and who you could believe and things like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And there were FBI agents on the case who did open it up a couple times after that and kind of try and get more answers, and they kind of went cold again.
Yeah, there was cold case detectives. I'm not sure if they were FBI. I know Suffolk County cold case detectives, definitely.
I'm not really sure how high up that goes. But,
yeah, and it never any progress, really. Never really progress. And I know that because like, I mean, I've been speaking with the family, like I've met with the family, I've gone there. And they remember very clearly, like I think it might have been in 2005. I could be wrong about that. It was the early 2000s was the last time a cold case detective contacted them and said like, there's nothing we can do. Like we looked over the case files from back in the 80s and the 90s, and all the leads are dead ends and there's nothing.
Yeah.
We kind of have figured out that might not necessarily be true. Like I feel like there definitely is more to this story than what some people have let on in like places of power.
Right.
That's what I was going to ask that next. Are you familiar with the Gilgo Beach murders out here on Long Island?
Of course.
So same thing in that. A lot of people think that there's like implications that law enforcement is involved in those. So my head immediately goes to that something here.
Totally. And I think that's fair because people know the history of Suffolk County Police. And I mean, even just thinking about her cause of death, natural causes. I mean, it's your mind just goes crazy thinking, well, how can that be? How can that be?
Right. Yeah.
And people always say the same thing to me when I tell them this story. They say, well, how could a girl have wrapped herself in a carpet, thrown herself in a ditch, and just simply passed away?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't have like that. How? Like, you know, like there's no explanation for that anywhere.
Yeah. And it's funny because we, with all of our guests so far, we kind of talk about favorite hangout spots in town. So what did they call it? The hut?
The hut or something? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's now an apartment complex, but I remember when it was being built, it's the space that's across from Breslau Cemetery off of Frank Street in Monroe over there, I guess, by the McDonald's on Sunrise Highway.
Mm-hmm.
So very close to the high school.
Right. Yeah, literally like 2.5 blocks away from the high school. But I guess at that time it was just a wooded area there where any number of nefarious things could happen.
Right. And, it was an entire summer where there was a body just laying there and nobody said
Right.
anything, you know?
Over the summer, like,
Right.
for 4 months. No
Yeah.
explanation. There's no explanation for that.
Yeah, it's very strange.
It's very, very strange. It's very strange. Like, welcome to my world. You're just trying
Right,
to
yeah.
find the answers to some of these questions.
No, I mean, even almost 40 years later, it's absolutely worth still looking into. There are
Of
so many
course.
answers still out
Yeah.
there, you know, needing to be found. You know, just to put the family at peace.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
It's
both
sad.
her parents are still around.
No, yeah, it's sad. Her father passed away a while ago, I think in 2001, and her mother just recently passed away 2 years ago. So I was 2 years too late. But her younger brother, James, is still around, and he's the person who I've really been speaking to and meeting with. And this was a crazy experience. But 2 years ago, when her mother passed away, you know, James and his family were cleaning out her home to put it on the market, and they went through her attic, and they found 12 or 13 boxes of Laura's things, of her personal items, of records and things like that. And they had just been there for 40 years. Like, they have not been opened since 1984. And he kind of forgot about them. He put them in a storage unit. I think he didn't really feel comfortable touching them at that time. But then, of course, when I come into the picture, it's like, okay, let's do this. Let's open these boxes up. Let's see what's in here. So, you know, me and my mother went out to Long Island and met his family, and they were so lovely. And we opened the boxes together for the first time since 1984. And it
Wow.
was just a time capsule. It was her clothing, her pinups of John Stamos and Ralph Macchio, and, you know, diaries and notebooks and poetry that she had written. It was all of her things. It was as if Mrs. Parker had packed up that girl's entire room and just threw it in her attic and never looked at it again.
Yeah.
So that is what's left. You know, all that's left is James and his memories of her and of his family and these boxes. And it really felt like we were meeting her for the first time, because he was 7 or 8 years old when his sister went missing.
Yeah. And so what was in those boxes, did that give you any sort of direction as to where to go next, as far as getting some more answers or speaking to more people in her life at the time?
Oh, most definitely, because there was lots of people who had either denied ever knowing her, whose names were on everything, or
Oh, okay.
or people that weren't, like, people in my mind who I think are suspects, who were not in her diary entries or not in anything that she had written down. So just different things were definitely answered, you know, not the whole thing. It's not like the case just like went wide open, but it definitely opened up some more lines that I can go to investigate deeper. Yeah, for sure.
Do you think you got a better sense of the kind of person she was from the stuff in those boxes?
Oh, most definitely. Oh my gosh, yes. And that was really the goal of going out there, because I mean, I thought about it from my perspective. If I was Laura, I wouldn't want my life story and or this podcast to just be about this awful thing that happened to me that resulted in my death. Like,
Right. She's a person. She has a story behind her that is not just
totally,
her disappearance.
totally. And she was only 14.
Yeah.
Like, she had so much more to live for. And
Mhm.
that was the hardest part. Before I had gone to Long Island, no one could tell me anything about her other than that she was sweet and nice. Like, that's all people would really tell me. So I got to learn firsthand who she was and what she wanted out of life. Like, she was a singer. She loved to sing in her church choir at school. She loved to swim. She loved to break dance. And I heard so many stories from James about memories and funny things that she would do. And she was really confident and spunky. And I read that. Like, I read her own words, like
Yeah.
how she would talk. And that was the thing that probably opened up the whole story for me. It was like, finally, I understand who she was. Like, I'm doing this whole podcast about her. I don't even know who she was. And now I know.
Right. And I think that, you know, that brings the human element into it. And I think it'll spark something in people to like kind of like grasp onto it a little bit more. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but there were some there were other disappearances and murders around that time that there are rumors are linked to her as well.
Yeah, yeah, there are. I think Nassau County, there are. Uh, they had been similar ages. They had, smoked pot as well. Like, ooh,
God forbid.
God forbid. And had been in high school. I think they had probably been 15 or 16. Some people think that there's a connection. I have sort of looked into it, but I don't see necessarily a connection to them. There was a case in Lindenhurst, not of a murder, but of a girl being kidnapped a year before Laura. And that was really an interesting story because the FBI and the Suffolk County Police Department found this girl in an apartment in Queens a week after she had gone missing. But they couldn't find Laura Parker, who was 3 blocks away.
Right there, yeah.
Deceased. Like it raised a lot of questions as to the severity of, like, they pick and choose which cases take the most serious.
How hard are they actually looking?
Right, exactly. And I don't think they were.
So after doing all this research and talking to all these people, like why do you think there's this kind of like gag order going on? But like what is your sense of why people don't want to talk about it?
I think it's almost like a case of like victim blaming kind of thing. And I got that sense after I learned more about who Laura was. Like, she was failing out of school. She had gotten into fights and had gotten suspended like 2 months before. And here she is, or, she's rumored to be doing drugs and smoking pot. And here she is found in this high school hangout where kids do drugs. So I think my theory about that is that the community probably figured, oh, like, she's a bad kid. She's like a bad egg.
Just a lost cause.
Yeah, like, why should we care? Like, almost like she put herself into the situation. So like, my kid's fine because my kid's good. But it's totally it's a stigmatized, stereotypical thing. Because when you're 14 years old, you don't know who you are. You're trying to find yourself. You're trying to find your identity. Like, if she had been given the chance to grow up, I'm sure she would have evolved. Like, she was just a kid. And I think the community didn't really care for that reason because of what she was kind of known for: getting in trouble, failing out of class, drugs, and things like that.
So that's what I was going to ask too. When I graduated, we had somebody who had passed away a year or two before, and they put a tribute to that person in our yearbook. Was there anything like that in your mother's yearbook? Any mention of her at all?
There was a photo of her, but there was no there was. But the school wasn't really cooperative either. Like, the Parkers wanted to have the funeral procession do a lap around Lindenhurst High School campus, or not maybe like on campus, like, like that walking path, I think, by the pool. They wanted to do like a funeral procession, just like the hearse around that. She had been in track and, whatever. And the high school said absolutely not, no. And they locked the gates, and they, the Parkers asked for like a memorial to be made. Lindenhurst High School said no. There was no sympathy whatsoever to the
because they couldn't present it as, oh, here's this perfect poster child who went missing. She was a straight A student. And
but at the same time, I guess there's some sort of liability, or maybe there's not, because of she was on the campus of the school and went missing from there as the last place she was seen.
That's also true.
Yeah,
like a PR protection kind of thing.
Yeah, she's a minor, so I don't know how that works, but I assume the school's responsible for the children that are supposed to be there.
You would think so, right? You would think so. Yeah.
Call me crazy.
Yeah,
that's wild. Okay, so podcast is about to come out. So now, do you have all the episodes done already, or is it ongoing?
It's still ongoing. Because and I was just having a discussion with my team about this. It doesn't feel like the work is done, and it might never be done. Like, the case might never be solved. And the podcast is turning into, it's obviously about the story and about the case and setting the record straight, but it's also a story about impact that it had on Lindenhurst and on the people in Lindenhurst and people closest to the case. So I'm still working through some of those episodes also, because new information comes in all the time. like on my end, like new leads and new people and things like that. So it's been changing a lot. I think it will be coming out in January, like maybe an episode or two, but I'm doing it like 2 episodes at a time at the moment.
And so, like, what is your vibe from the people now as far as like how this and other cases like it have impacted Lindenhurst, and like how people raise their kids, and the extra protections we have now? Obviously, school shootings are a huge thing now. So, like, you go to the high school and it's like Fort Knox. It's just,
Oh yeah.
the metal detector and the whole nine. But what's your vibe from parents and people who were around back then, as far as like what it was like then and what it's like now, for kids, as far as like protecting them and how we look after our children?
Yeah. Well, it's crazy because a lot of people who were older and were parents or would have been parents, and they'll reach out to me on Facebook and they'll say, I didn't even know this happened. I didn't even know a girl was kidnapped the year before. I didn't know that Laura Parker was missing and was murdered. Like, a lot of people didn't even know it happened back then and are learning about it for the first time now.
Yeah.
Really goes to show you how much things have changed. I know there was a security guard in 1984, but there was just one security guard who would sit at the front desk, and she went out the back way, and
Yeah.
it's so different now. And even when I went to Lindenhurst High School, I just walked the grounds because I wanted to walk in her steps. I wanted to see the route she took. There was gates, like everything was locked, like it was really secure over there. And like I said before, with social media, something happens and someone posts it, boom, everyone knows about it. Everybody
Hashtags
knows
flying around. Yeah.
everybody.
Right.
But back then, all you would hear is like the rumor mill of people gossiping in like a small town. And if you knew the right people, then you would know everything. And if you didn't, you didn't know anything. You were completely in the dark.
Yeah.
I was curious, Lindenhurst is filled with a lot of interesting characters. Once you kind of put it out there that you were doing a podcast like this, do you feel like people that might have been reluctant to talk about this in the past came forward just to kind of get their 15 minutes on a podcast or something like that? Or has everyone kind of not really been disingenuous and really just been, talking about what you'd like them to talk about, if that makes any sense?
Oh no, it's been a mosh pot. It's been
Yeah.
a mosh pot of different people. Oh yeah. And I think it comes with the territory when you do
Of
something
course.
like this. It really
I don't want to generalize and say did the craziest come out of the woodwork, but that's kind of, it's where I'm getting at.
But some of them did.
Yeah.
Some of them did. Oh yeah. And that's the trouble with it. Any information that someone gives me, in order for me to trust that information, I need to
Right.
verify it.
Yeah.
I can't
And
verify it.
that can be impossible at times, I'd imagine.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was something that happened 40 years ago. Sometimes it's
a lot of my cousin's neighbor's friend told me the thing about that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I heard it from this person, I heard it from that person. It's like, or how do you know this? No response. Like things like that. I don't know about 15 seconds of fame. I mean, some people might be. It's also, I have said how helpful Facebook has been in tracking people down, but Facebook is just like a crazy place to be in general, like the platform. So it's been a struggle some points trying to verify like whose information I can trust and who I can't. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's that surprising. Like, you figure it out pretty quickly who's being a little crazy,
I myself, I'm a very big true crime fan, but I find it funny a lot of the times, like how quickly some people are willing to talk about a terrible thing that had nothing to do with them,
Yeah,
just to be in the conversation, really.
Exactly.
Yeah, just to give their piece, which is incredibly helpful when you were close to the case. But if you know nothing about it, and it's a waste of my time and everyone else's time who reads it. So I actually just put on my Facebook page like the tip line for the Suffolk County Police Department. So I was like, if you're really serious about this, call the police and tell them what you're putting on social media.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're just a journalist, and you only have the powers that you have to bring this to life. But you know,
Yeah, totally.
it has to go to the proper authorities at the end.
Yeah.
So we will post the tip line in our
Oh,
posts for
thank
sure.
you.
And hopefully, we can give you a little boost and shed some light on this case.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Because I think it's important, and it's even this much time later, there are obvious things that are just like missing for no reason.
Right, but in my head, unfortunately, I think those are things you can't get back, and like TV shows and movies have shown me, if this is true, it's important to canvass the scene after it happened, and if that didn't happen, you're never going to find that kind of evidence that would lead to that sort of stuff,
Sure.
A lot of just shoddy police work.
Right.
From the very beginning of the investigation that totally messed it up for the rest of it, which is I would debate is part of the reason why it's still unsolved.
Right.
Just like from the beginning, small mistakes that snowballed into much bigger problems.
Well, Alex, thanks so much for joining us. We're looking forward to the podcast and getting the name out there. So just let us know where people can find you on the web, where they can find the podcast and the official website for it.
Yeah, so Lost in Lindy has a Facebook page, and then the website is called lostinlindy.com, and it will be on all the platforms, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever. You should be able to find it. But yeah, just give me a follow on Facebook, and that's where all the updates will be.